She walked into the grand ballroom wearing a simple black dress and a delicate gold necklace. The room sparkled with diamonds, designer gowns, and wealthy guests who measured worth by price tags. Whispers started as soon as she passed, smirks, chuckles, and quiet comments about her plain jewelry. To them, she didn't belong. In their world of excess, subtle elegance was mistaken for cheapness. They had no idea who she really was. Among the glittering elite, she stood calm and poised, clutching a small clutch bag, trying not to let their judgment show. One woman even leaned in to ask, half joking, if her necklace came from a street vendor. A few guests laughed. She simply smiled. But something shifted when an elderly man at the back of the room froze. His eyes locked on the necklace, his face went pale, and he whispered something to the host. Suddenly, all eyes turned not with mockery this time, but with confusion and awe. People started murmuring, recognizing the symbol on the pendant. Wasn't just jewelry, it was a legacy. And within moments, the woman everyone mocked would be revealed as someone far greater than any of them could have imagined. The host's expression changed instantly. What was once a welcoming smile turned into nervous curiosity. He stepped forward, quietly asking the woman where she got the necklace. The room hushed again. All the chatter, the gossip, the judgment tit stopped. She looked up calmly and answered with just one word: family. That one word echoed louder than the music still playing faintly in the background. Some of the older guests began shifting uncomfortably, whispering to each other, clearly recognizing something the younger crowd didn't. One woman near the back pulled out her phone and started searching, eyes darting between the necklace and the massive portrait that hung behind the head table. That's when it started to click. The portrait-an, elegant older woman, graceful and strong, wore the exact same necklace. But it wasn't just a match. It was a symbol, a royal crest, long hidden from public view, from a noble line that once ruled before fading into silence. People began piecing it together. But how could someone so important walk in alone, unannounced, and be treated like a nobody? The air thickened with curiosity and quiet regret. Whispers grew louder. And still, she stood silent, watching as the truth slowly began to surface, as the crowd buzzed with quiet confusion. A few guests stepped back, trying to remember where they'd seen that necklace before. One man, an investor known for flaunting his connections, leaned toward his wife and muttered, "She can't be who I think she is." That royal family disappeared decades ago. His wife, who had been one of the first to laugh at the necklace, now looked uneasy, clutching her wine glass tightly. Across the room, a young journalist invited only because of her boss's last-minute cancellation watched closely. She'd recognized the symbol the moment she saw it, but wasn't sure if she should say anything. She quietly took out her phone and snapped a discreet photo, thinking this might be the story that would finally prove her worth. Meanwhile, the host, who had worked hard to build his image in elite circles, seemed torn. If she really was who they suspected, why hadn't he known? Why wasn't she on the guest list? The woman remained silent, offering no explanation. She didn't flinch, but under her calm face was a storm. She hadn't come to impress or to show off her background. She came for something else, something tied to the portrait behind her and the legacy it held. And not everyone in the room wanted that truth to come out. The whispers grew louder, now tinged with fear. People began backing away from her, not out of rudeness anymore, but uncertainty. The symbol on her necklace wasn't just rare, it was protected, historic, and buried in stories most thought were just myths. A few older guests exchanged looks, their faces pale. Some of them had been part of the business deals, the politics, the quiet power struggles that led to that royal family's downfall, if she was truly one of them. Then her presence tonight wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. The host cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the room. "Miss, I think there's been some confusion. Perhaps we should speak in private." His voice cracked. Slightly, she didn't move. Instead, she slowly stepped forward, right beneath the portrait of the woman, her grandmother. The resemblance was now undeniable. People gasped. The woman in black reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, sealed with the same royal crest. The journalist stopped breathing for a second. The host took a step back, and several guests began texting frantically. Something big was happening, and the tension was suffocating. Whatever was in that envelope was about to change everything, and nobody in that ballroom was ready for it. Just as she began to break the seal on the envelope, the ballroom doors slammed open with a loud thud. All heads turned. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped in, flanked by two others in dark suits. He walked with purpose, eyes locked on the woman holding the envelope. Guests whispered his name, Julian Vexley, a powerful real estate tycoon with deep political ties and a long history of shady business buried behind elegant suits and polished smiles. He didn't smile now. "Don't open that," he said coldly, his voice echoing across the silent room. The woman's fingers froze. Julian continued, walking toward her, each step heavy with tension. "You think showing up here with an old crest makes you untouchable?" he said quietly but firmly. "You don't know what you're walking into." She looked at him, unshaken. "I know exactly what I'm walking into, and I know what was taken from my family." Now the guests were panicking, unsure whether to stay or leave. The journalist recorded every second, while the host tried to act like he was still in control, though sweat beaded on his forehead. Whatever was in that envelope wasn't just a document, it was a key. And Julian clearly had something to lose. If it was revealed, the woman stared Julian down, then, without a word, broke the seal and unfolded the document. Gasps filled the room as she held up an old, signed deed complete with stamps, signatures, and legal notations proving ownership of the land, the hotel, and much of the surrounding property stood on. It wasn't just a forgotten family heirloom. It was proof that her family had once ruled this land, that their power had been stolen through forged documents and backdoor deals, all linked back to Julian himself. "You buried this," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "You erased us from records, paid off officials, and built your empire on lies. But you forgot one thing. Paper leaves a trail." Julian's face twisted. "You think you can just show up and take everything back?" "I don't need to take anything," she said. "The law already says it's mine." Before he could respond, several guests, including one former judge, stepped forward to confirm the document's legitimacy. Julian's allies backed away, and the journalist was already uploading footage to her news outlet. His power crumbled in minutes, but just as relief filled the room, the woman added, "This isn't the only deed that survived." She smiled slightly, and the room went silent again. Julian stood frozen, his empire unraveling before the very people who once admired him. The woman, now no longer a mystery but a rightful heir, folded the deed and placed it back in her clutch. The crowd, once so quick to judge her by her appearance, now looked at her with a mix of awe and guilt. The host tried to save face with a stiff apology, but she simply nodded and turned to leave, her presence commanding more respect in silence than their titles ever had in words. The journalist's footage went viral by morning. Headlines praised the unknown woman who exposed decades of corruption with nothing more than grace and truth. Authorities quietly launched investigations. Julian disappeared from public view. In the days that followed, she didn't make speeches or seek revenge. Instead, she quietly reclaimed what was hers, restoring the legacy her family had built with honor. The necklace once mocked became a symbol of resilience, royalty, and justice, and those who had laughed at her now remembered that night not for the glamour, but for the woman who walked in alone and changed everything. Because sometimes, the most powerful statements come from the people no one saw coming.